Mr. Seataller.
Again, thank you, Mayor. As we talked about earlier, with ideas and resolutions and motions and so forth that start out in a draft form, I've had, as this council or members may recall, some desire with respect to compensation overview, much like I had a year ago with auditing overview. And so the concept is very similar, and that is, can a group of individuals come together, whether it be an audit committee, which we passed last year, or in this case a compensation committee, and do some good. And when I suggest doing some good, what I mean is having a reflection or a nature of both independence and representing maybe different pieces to those who are charged effectively with running the financial affairs of the city. The draft that's in the minutes represented a sort of second draft that I had, and what I passed out and cleared here with Mr. Geilman is a third draft. So gentlemen, what you have is a red line copy in terms of changes made. Did these get down to the end of the row there, all the way?
For each of the
Did these get down the end? Everybody's got what we're looking at here. So the red line draft represents what was in the packet for today, and changes that I went through and made most recently, in fact, yesterday. And the clean copy then represents the accepted changes of this. And so if it's agreeable, rather than spend time on things that were in or weren't, unless somebody has a particular issue they want to talk about, I'd rather touch on the highlights of what represents now the sort of current draft for the discussion only. And if I may proceed, Mayor.
Yes.
Okay. Just got a few whereas. I'm not going to read this to you, but I'm going to paraphrase some things. The first one is that employee compensation historically has been 77% of our general fund. And so it's big. The second is a statement that city management and elected officials jointly share the responsibility for fiscal oversight, budgets, and sustainability. And before we go any further, I'd just like to get a verification on that so we don't end up circling back around to undercut or whatever. May I ask the city manager if that's a true statement, or if he has anything that, with respect to that statement, that doesn't quite reflect how we're organized?
Actually, I think if you go back and look at the ordinances, there really isn't a shared responsibility. City management has the responsibility for the oversight of budgets and sustainability under the general direction of elected officials. Yeah,
so there may be a little better way to word that. Right. And I'm very, very open to that. But the concept is that you have a part of city management, we have a part as elected officials. You can't abdicate your role, and we shouldn't abdicate our role.
Correct.
In terms of the oversight. So we can reword, and I'm very open to that. The third is that city leadership, and that's broadly elected and executive, recently published a goal of gradually moving the total compensation expense to a target of 65% of the general funds over time, and I might add that. But this is a result of some visioning and discussion about what we can do towards the future. So we've got something that needs to give in time. Obviously, if revenues go up and compensation goes up less rapidly, you hit that 65% mark more easily, but there are other things to consider. The fourth whereas is that there's significant effort focused on compensation and benefits management, which are or should be governed by established principles and guidelines. And if I might, Mayor, what I'd like to do just real quickly is quote, I hope I still have this up here, but is to quote from an email from Mrs. Auger. And what she said here talks about the fox guarding the hen house. She said there must be some oversight on this. She's talking about compensation and benefits and whatever. Some checks and balances, some protocol to establish what is and is not acceptable. And I agree wholeheartedly with what Mrs. Auger wrote in this email a couple of weeks ago, and would simply like to suggest that, in my view, she's expressing the will and the interests of residents around the city with respect to there ought to be some kind of balance to this process. We shouldn't be, as elected officials, able to sign papers and determine our own wages, or as our full-time employees be able to, without some means of comparison and et cetera. And I'm not suggesting that that's been done. I'm simply saying that this oversight would provide the comparisons and that balance. Whereas current benefit administration is more particularly managed by by city management with the aggregate submissions to the city council for annual budget approval. We've been through this cycle twice since I've been involved here. And the fact is, if you're not talking about benefits and structure and percentage of compensation and so forth and how that moves forward, sometime very early in the year, you're not going to be in a position for the next year's budget to have any impact once it's rolled up and presented. All you do is look foolish to try and peel back the budget and say why this and benefits have increased this much if you haven't gotten ahead of the curve and begun to examine that many months in advance. That's what that's about. Resolve, therefore, okay, but one more whereas. Employees and elected officials of the city should be compensated in a fair and reasonable manner without political manipulation, and again, underscoring that sort of independence. Resolve, therefore, the compensation committee be formed. That the composition include the city manager, city human resource officer, and that may not be quite exactly the right term, whatever Paul's right term is, but that's the idea. Mayor, one council member is recommended by the mayor and approved by a majority of the council, and one resident from the city of South Jordan, professionally qualified, with managerial experience, who by application is considered and appointed by a majority vote of the council. That the service terms are the mayor, council, or city manager, city officer would be standing members. That the council member and resident serving would serve no longer than 4 years, and at the end of that time would have to be off the committee for a minimum of 2 years to provide some rotation and objectivity. That there should be no additional compensation to the committee members excepting for the city resident who would have no other assignment or position. And the reason for that is that they're not really biased towards the historical things because they've been on that committee, and anything coming along and somebody working in that area, whatever it might be, just seems better for the independence. That no other position within the city, committees or volunteers, shall be compensated on an established per diem basis for daily service, not expected, but it wouldn't be expressly limited to be more than 5 days of service in a year for this compensation committee interface. That the authority of the committee shall be as a recommended body to review and compare salaries, both for internal and external equity, and benefits for all classes of city employees. And in this instance, elected officials are employees for the city. Recommend practices, approach, philosophy, and compensation consistent with the goals established together by the council and city management from time to time, kind of like what we did with visioning and where we're going as a percentage and things along that nature. The idea that our employees should be compensated at a level towards the higher end of the comparables is a philosophy. It's to say we've got the best and the brightest, we've got a vibrant city, we're growing, et cetera, and we need to attract talent. If somebody has the choice of working for our police department or the city of Murray, and they may be on Unified, I don't know, but the point is that's a philosophy to say we want to hire and retain, to the extent practical, employees that are of a caliber that would mark our city high. My point there being to say that these are philosophies that ought to be established together. Benefit philosophy should be established together, etc. Further, that specific plans for insurance and other benefit administration be solicited, reviewed, and recommended by this committee from year to year. And so that provides an opportunity for us not to be as a council surprised in the sense of here's the budget and here's the roll-up and here's 412,000 additional for this and this is what it adds up to. And but by the way, from a practical standpoint, you can't do anything about it. Doesn't seem like it's the right kind of oversight that I feel like we ought to have. Further, on the backside, the committee...
Mark, will you explain that one again?
Yeah.
What you just said?
The one I just said with
Yes.
respect to the timing of things and how it rolls up
Yes.
with the benefits. Okay. Let's say, for example, our benefit plan's mostly on a calendar year. Is that how our administration is? Okay, so we were starting on July 1 with new benefits as well as with the fiscal year. Okay, good. And so benefits are starting on July 1, and we see the first budget draft at, let's say, February or so. By that time, the commitments, the expectations, the new plans, the rates, some of those things have been already factored in. And we see this thing and we start to say, well, it seems like, just pick on health insurance. Health insurance went up 9% this last year. You know, why is that? Well, it's this and this is the best quote and this is what we have. And what can we do about that? And at that point, the answer is very little. So the purpose of having somebody involved is that maybe November and into the end of the year, and when these options are being looked at for the new fiscal year, the new July 1, individuals on the compensation committee then would solicit and have ideas consistent with philosophies that have been established and be able to work together to provide some means of visibility at a time when that visibility can lead to decisions that are consistent with the philosophy of the city as jointly established. So that's what I mean by that one. Compare comparable compensation. Oh, this is one specific to the elected officials. Elected officials taking into consideration location, size, growth, development, and services provided, differential duties of the mayor, and so forth. So it expressly says to the compensation committee, hey, look at, and independent from us and our direct involvement with this, or the clumsiness with which that comes around both internally as well as externally, take that on as well. That the committee determine and publish, please.
What does the differential duties of the mayor have to do with the compensation review?
Oh, it has quite a bit to do at the moment, and as established by prior councils, the mayor is compensated at a different level than the 5 elected council representatives. And there's some historical basis for that, as prior councils have established. And so that's the concept there.
Now, what does his duties have to do with compensation?
What do his duties have to do with
Differential
compensation?
duties of the mayor.
The mayor has different duties than council members. The mayor serves and is involved for longer periods of time than council members. The mayor has responsibilities that are different than council members with respect to city representation on boards, providing letters, supporting certain issues, involvement with the legislature, etc. Much like in any work environment, if the work I do is different than the director that I report to, our differential duties are some basis for considering differentials in compensation. The next item, that the committee determine and publish from time to time, no less frequently than every 2 years, compensation, mayor or other members of the council without the vote or approval of the council. That the published compensation, when altered, be effective beginning of the subsequent calendar year, be reviewed and adjusted no less frequently than every 2 years, and that the committee be guided by principles of fairness, equity, element of personal sacrifice by elected officials, a conservative approach of not leading the market, but fairly and independently administer the compensation of the City of South Jordan's employees, and that a written report and presentation be formally presented prepared and presented to South Jordan City Council in January of each year, thus preceding the first draft of the upcoming fiscal year budget.
Question on that one, Mark?
Yes.
And it's the committee approves it every 2 years?
Yeah.
Compensation?
It's a concept,
a concept that
Yeah.
they don't have to report? Wouldn't be, I mean, if we're going to raise salaries, don't you have to bring that for a public meeting, or you don't want that?
Oh, no, I don't want to abdicate or forego or shortchange anything that ought to be part of a public meeting. And the wording on this, I think, it can be significantly improved. But the concept is that every couple of years, that this be revisited and republished, as opposed to the historical concept, which is every year the compensation adjusts. And so my concept here was to not make this as onerous as every year we've got to do something or set a new schedule or whatever it might be, but every other year. And whatever the proper public involvement, disclosure, hearings and vote are required.
Well, and I
yeah.
agree with you, it'd probably be written better.
Yeah. Thanks. We both agree on that.
I have something if I could.
Hmm?
The third paragraph seems to be a little bit in conflict with the last paragraph, the third to the last paragraph.
On the back page?
On the back page. It's the one that begins with that and then skipping the next that and then finally the last that. And that is that it indicates there that this finding would be then beginning at the beginning of the calendar year.
Right, yeah.
And if they don't report until the middle of that January, it might be too late for that to actually be in place. Does that make sense to what I'm saying?
Yeah, so what you're saying, if I hear you correctly, is that it may be better, and particularly with benefit years starting July 1, that a fiscal year date would be more appropriate than a calendar year date, because it's awkward the way it's written here. And I appreciate that, and that's a quick and simple change, and certainly keeping in the spirit with things, just being sort of an every other year deal.
So, Mark, are you saying that the committee determines the compensation and that the council doesn't vote on that?
Yeah, what the intent is, and irrespective of the exact words I put in this draft, the intent, and as we refine this, is that the committee have a strong hand in recommendation, and that from there, if whether it be for city employees or elected council representatives, whatever it might be, if there are requirements for public hearing, for discussion based on the committee's recommendation, that we take that into account and that the council perform all of its duties, but that we have a basis that's independent from just the council maybe working with one person or the council sort of conflicted internally of, about what there is. At least we have a basis that represents a broad view, looks at information, makes some recommendation.
So the council would still vote on the pay level
Yeah,
of the council?
and we effectively do this for everybody who's in the budget, because we vote for the budget, and our nominal wages compared to full-time are part of the budget. So it seems to me, and I don't know exactly what the requirement is, but it seems to me, be rolled into the budget discussion and hearings there, unless there's some requirement that it be publicly noticed and discussed separately. Sort of my concept, but the whole idea being that there's a function that's being performed that none of us independently, none of us together can perform, to take a step away from this dais and our public meetings here, and work in this way to provide these recommendations that would feed the budget, and certainly can be altered by us through the process of review, but would remove that from our direct involvement in signing documents for our own raises and that sort of thing that we're trying to work through.